Hey, Daily Dosers, we're coming at you for evidence number 5 for God's existence. One of the most popular questions that you get, and if I'm doing a debate or if I'm doing some kind of discussion or if I'm doing a class on this or if I'm teaching at a local college, one of the most popular questions I get at the end of a conversation is people generally tend to nod along and go, okay. Now, again, what I just gave you guys the last 4 days in 5 minutes, I generally will tease out, give examples, give evidences, give laboratory tests for those things. And each of those classes might exceed 2 or 3 hours, but I tried to just compartmentalize it into a small thing. But then people always go, okay, fine. But if God is so good, then why is there so much evil in the world? And when we say that, I think one of the fundamental questions we have to ask is kind of what we talked about yesterday, which is, first of all, where are you getting this idea of evil from? We have to first have an objective standard of what evil is in order to dictate that anything is evil, because ultimately, if all we are natural blind processes, if you and I are just bags of stardust that are here by chance and had no real meaning or purpose in the first place, then what I do to you and what you do to me and what we do to each other is ultimately meaningless. So we actually have to first borrow from God this idea of good and evil in order to make a case against him. But let's just argue that we can. And let's say that in the world there is gratuitous evil. It seems to be of no value whatsoever. It's just evil stuff. Disease, famine, rape, genocide, homicide. All these things take place, and it's just evil. It's horrible that it happens. If God is so powerful, he ought to be able to stop it. And if God is so loving, he should want to stop it, shouldn't he? And since there is evil, God is either not all powerful and therefore not God, or he's not all loving and therefore not God. And now there's probably 100 things in there that actually have fallacies inside of them. But at the heart of it, we're really asking the question, why doesn't God do something about the suffering in the world? Which is to kind of put God on trial and say, God, if you're there, why aren't you doing something? Which truly isn't an argument against God existing, because what if it were the case, and it's not, that there is a God, he just doesn't care about stopping things, or he just doesn't care about helping people? That's not an argument that God doesn't exist. It would just mean you would say, there was a God and I don't like how he acts. But I think the Bible does you one better, and it says that the God that we believe exists is powerful enough to stop it. His love, when it comes to his love isn't ultimately concerned with stopping every bit of evil that has ever happened, but instead to draw people to himself even through those trials and through those tribulations. Nowhere in Scripture does it say that if God is powerful, he will stop everything bad that will ever happen to us. So then to put God on trial for not stopping the stuff that in Scripture he said he wasn't going to do doesn't make a lot of sense. If I told you for certain, I am not like this, and I'm definitely not doing this, and then I don't do that, would you tell me I was being inconsistent with my nature? No, you would say, you kind of promised that's exactly what was going to happen. And that's what Scripture says. It says, in this world, you will have trouble. Jesus then gives us the hope of saying, but this life is short. It's a vapor in the wind. And ultimately, God says that I have overcome the world. And this isn't saying that atheists can't be good people. That is no part of it. I think some of the greatest people I know are people that aren't believers. In fact, there's some people that I know that are quote-unquote Christians that are pretty messed up, including yours truly. But that's not really an argument. And if you meet someone and you go, well, I met this Christian one time and they were really rude, that has nothing to do with someone's philosophical ideology, does it? That's like me meeting someone who's an atheist who's rude and saying, therefore, there must be a God. You would joke with me and you would go, you can't take that seriously. If I meet a mean atheist, can I make the assumption then that there must be a God? No, but what you're saying is you're being inconsistent with your worldview. But ultimately, atheism is trying to make the best sense of this worldview. And a lot of times people who are atheistic preach this idea of, let's just be good people. We don't need a God to do that. But let me make this counter argument, because I get challenged with this all the time. Well, almost every war that's ever fought was on religious bases, but almost no one does their research. In fact, there's a guy he wrote the book, The Encyclopedia of the Wars, and he came out to this idea that only about 2 to 7% of all deaths in all of the past of every single war that's ever been had any religious cause whatsoever. And even those religious ones weren't pertinently saying, God wanted me to do this. That jumped it down to that 2% mark. And again, any ideology that's based on a body count doesn't make any sense. In fact, if you took just the people who were killed under 20th century communist atheist regimes, your body count's around 100 million of people who were actually murdered. That's not to mention those who died of starvation, which jumps way into the 200 millions. More people died underneath communist regimes than in World War I and World War II nearly combined. So a worldview isn't marked by the number of people who practice it well or not. So that's really not proper argument against God's existence. In fact, it's an argument for his, because we're all standing with an objective understanding of there is evil, God come help us, and Scripture has this ultimate plan for the evil in our world, that God came in the person of Jesus and saved us from that evil. This has been the 5 arguments for God's existence.